You stand on the bank of a great American river in the middle of July. It might be the Mississippi, cutting the country in half. It might be the Ohio, or the Missouri, or the Red River winding through the plains of Texas. The water here is heavy. It is warm, brown, and thick with the silt of 1,000,000 acres of farmland. You watch a barge push slowly against the current, churning up mud and foam. You swat a mosquito. You wipe the sweat from your neck. This is the heartland. It is agricultural, industrial, and thoroughly domesticated. You are 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean. When you look at this water, you think of flathead catfish resting in the sunken timber. You think of snapping turtles and gar. It is the safest, most familiar kind of wildness we have. But the water is hiding a secret that breaks every rule of the natural world. It is 1995. The town is Alton, Illinois. 2 commercial fishermen are out on the Mississippi River, working their standard routine. They are hauling up heavy wire mesh traps from the muddy bottom, expecting a routine catch of rough fish. The water here is purely fresh. It is surrounded by cornfields, limestone bluffs, and the sprawling infrastructure of the Midwest. The men haul a trap over the gunwale of their boat. Inside the steel mesh, thrashing with a kind of violent heavy muscle that does not belong in this water, is a shark. It is 5 feet long. It weighs over 60 pounds. It has a blunt, heavy snout, small, cold eyes, and a jaw lined with serrated triangular teeth. It is a bull shark. And it is alive. It is alive in a place where, by every law of biology, it should be dead. Alton, Illinois is roughly 1,000 miles upriver from the Gulf of Mexico. To get here, this animal had to leave the salt water of the ocean, enter the mouth of the Mississippi, and swim continuously against a massive, relentless current, straight up the gut of the North American continent. When the story hit the news, it sounded like an urban legend. People assumed it was a prank. They assumed someone had caught a shark in the Gulf, packed it on ice, and dumped it in the river for a photograph. But the biologists who examined the animal confirmed the truth. It was a healthy, living specimen. And worse, it was not the first. In 1937, another bull shark was caught in the exact same stretch of river in Alton. They have been pulled from the Ohio River. They have been spotted in the Potomac River in Maryland, swimming past the suburbs of Washington, D.C. They have been documented hundreds of miles up the Red River and the Trinity River in Texas. The file of inland sightings is not a collection of myths. It is a growing, verified scientific record. Which brings us to a wall, a biological barrier that is supposed to keep the horrors of the deep sea out of our backyards. That barrier is salt. To understand why a shark in Illinois is so deeply unsettling, you have to understand the invisible wall that separates the ocean from the land. Marine animals and freshwater animals live in 2 completely different universes, separated by the physics of osmosis. A shark's body is built to exist in a saltwater environment. The concentration of salt inside the shark's cells is balanced with the heavy concentration of salt in the ocean water around it. If you take a normal marine shark, a great white, a tiger shark, a mako, and put it in the fresh water of the Mississippi River, the results are catastrophic, and they are fast. Because the surrounding fresh water has a lower concentration of salt than the shark's body, water rapidly invades the shark's cells to try and balance the equation. The shark's cells begin to swell. Its kidneys fail. Its tissues rupture. It bloats, it seizes, and it dies in agony within a matter of hours. This is the evolutionary wall. It is an absolute, uncompromising rule of nature. The ocean stays in the ocean. The inland rivers belong to us. But the bull shark does not respect the wall. When you look into the biology of how this animal survives in a muddy Midwestern river, you find a story that fits almost too perfectly. Science provides a neat, mechanical explanation for the anomaly. The bull shark is what biologists call euryhaline. It has the ability to tolerate a massive range of salinity, from the hyper-salty waters of the open ocean to the pure, fresh water of a mountain-fed river. It does this through a specialized set of organs. The bull shark's kidneys are capable of doing something no other large shark can do. When the animal enters fresh water, its kidneys instantly shift their function. Instead of holding on to water and expelling salt, they begin to frantically pump water out of the body while desperately hoarding every single molecule of salt. Furthermore, the bull shark retains massive amounts of urea in its bloodstream. Urea is a waste product that most animals excrete in their urine, but the bull shark holds onto it, using it to artificially inflate the density of its own blood, balancing its internal chemistry with the fresh water outside. It essentially poisons itself just enough to survive. It is an evolutionary marvel. A perfect biological machine that explains how a predator designed for the coral reefs and the coastal drop-offs can suddenly appear next to a cornfield in Illinois. But if you look closely at this neat scientific explanation, a crack begins to form. Even this story refuses to stay simple. Because biology is governed by an even higher law, the economy of energy. Nature is incredibly frugal. It does not waste motion. It does not burn fuel for a change of scenery. The biological process of osmoregulation, the constant frantic pumping of the kidneys to keep the fresh water from rupturing the shark's cells, takes a massive amount of metabolic energy. The shark is burning through calories at an accelerated rate just to stay alive in the river. And then there is the current. The Mississippi River discharges roughly 600,000 cubic feet of water per second. It is a relentless physical force pushing south toward the Gulf. To reach Alton, Illinois, a bull shark has to swim against that crushing pressure for 1,000 miles. It is the equivalent of running on a treadmill that never stops, while carrying a heavy weight for weeks on end. Why would an apex predator, perfectly adapted to the food-rich environment of the ocean, subject itself to this? In the Gulf of Mexico, a bull shark has an endless buffet of stingrays, sea turtles, dolphins, and schooling fish. In the Mississippi River, the visibility is near zero, the current is punishing, the fresh water is actively trying to destroy its cells, and the prey is sparse. It makes absolutely no sense. If an animal is burning that much energy, it is being driven by a force we do not fully understand. Which raises the first real question. Are these animals lost, confused by the murky water, or is the environment itself changing, pushing them out of their natural boundaries? If you're still with me, you are clearly someone who wants to know the reality of the spaces around us, not just the postcard version. You are someone who understands that the natural world is much stranger and much closer than we like to admit. Take a second to subscribe. Because from here, the theories stop being comforting, and the reality of what is swimming in these rivers becomes much harder to ignore. The second explanation scientists offer is environmental. They suggest that the sharks are not deliberately seeking out the Midwest, but are being drawn in by changes in the river systems themselves. Over the last few decades, we have seen historic droughts plague the American interior. When the rivers run low, the immense pressure of the freshwater current drops, and when that happens, the ocean pushes back. This creates something called a salt wedge. A heavy, dense layer of salt water from the Gulf of Mexico creeps along the bottom of the Mississippi River, sliding underneath the lighter fresh water on the surface. During severe droughts, this salt wedge has been recorded pushing north past New Orleans, creeping up towards Baton Rouge. The theory is that bull sharks, following the saltwater and the marine prey caught inside it, simply ride this invisible wedge of ocean deep into the continent. They don't know they have left the sea until the wedge dissipates, leaving them stranded in the fresh water. It sounds logical. It frames the sharks as accidental tourists, pushed around by climate and weather patterns. But like the first theory, this explanation falls apart the further up the river you look. A salt wedge might explain a shark in Louisiana. It might even explain a shark in southern Mississippi, but it does not explain a shark in Alton, Illinois. It does not explain a shark in the upper reaches of the Ohio River. The salt wedge does not reach that far, not even close. And then there is the engineering. To get from the Gulf of Mexico to the upper stretches of the Mississippi or the Ohio, a bull shark does not just have to fight the current. It has to navigate one of the most heavily engineered waterways on the planet. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has transformed these rivers into a massive staircase of concrete, steel, locks and dams. There are massive barriers of churning turbines, underwater spillways, and sheer concrete walls. To reach Alton, a shark has to bypass these structures. A lost, confused animal does not accidentally navigate a complex navigational lock system. The only way past these dams is to follow the massive commercial barges into the locks, wait for the heavy steel gates to close, wait for the water level to rise, and then swim out the other side when the gates open. This requires a level of intentionality that shatters the idea of a lost fish. They are not wandering aimlessly. They are actively figuring out human engineering, waiting in the churning backwash of towboats and slipping through the concrete gates to continue their journey north. The dot on the map where they are found looks the same whether they are lost or whether they are hunting, but the behavior required to get there suggests something deeply unsettling. They are adapting to our infrastructure. Which brings us to the third thread of this mystery, the detail that does not alleviate the anxiety but amplifies it: the catch. If bull sharks are intentionally navigating 1,000 miles of inland rivers, bypassing dams and burning massive amounts of energy to survive in fresh water, they must be getting something out of it. Some researchers point to reproduction. We know that bull sharks use coastal estuaries and the shallow mouths of rivers as nurseries. The pregnant females give birth in the murky, brackish water because the massive marine predators that would normally eat the young, like great white sharks and killer whales, cannot cross the salt barrier. The fresh water is a safe zone, but moving a few miles up an estuary to drop a pup is one thing. Moving 1,000 miles into the deep interior of a continent is something else entirely. Are they establishing long-term inland populations? Are they finding a new food source that makes the brutal journey worth the effort? The true horror of the bull shark in American rivers is not its size, or its teeth, or the fact that it is considered by many marine biologists to be the single most dangerous shark species to humans due to its sheer aggression and proximity to shores. The true horror is the medium in which it travels. We have been conditioned by movies and television to fear the clear blue water of the ocean. We imagine looking down through crystal clear waves and seeing a dark shape rising from the depths. But the rivers of the American interior are not clear. The Mississippi, the Ohio, the Trinity, they are opaque. They are the color of heavily creamed coffee. The turbidity is absolute. If you step into the Mississippi River to launch a boat, or if you wade into a tributary in Texas to cool off on a summer afternoon, you cannot see your own feet. You cannot see an inch below the surface. In the ocean, a bull shark is in its element, but it can be seen. In a muddy Midwestern river, it is a ghost. It is entirely invisible. It does not leave a wake. It does not break the surface to announce its presence. It swims low against the muddy bottom, using its lateral line, a highly sensitive organ running down its sides, to detect the electrical impulses and vibrations of movement in the absolute dark. It does not need to see you to know exactly where you are. This invisibility is what makes the growing file of inland sightings so disturbing. Think about the sheer scale of the Mississippi River Basin. It drains 31 states. It contains tens of thousands of miles of interconnected, deeply murky waterways. Now think about the few bull sharks we actually know about. The ones caught in Alton in 1995 and 1937. The ones caught by commercial netters in the Atchafalaya Basin. The ones hooked by surprised fishermen casting for catfish on a quiet Friday night. These were not the only sharks in the river. They were just the ones that got incredibly unlucky. For every single bull shark that happens to swim into a wire mesh trap or happens to take a piece of cut bait from a stunned local fisherman, how many hundreds have swam past silently in the dark water? We have absolutely no way to measure their population in these rivers. We cannot conduct aerial surveys because the water is too muddy. We cannot dive to count them because the currents are too dangerous and the visibility is zero. The few data points we have are just the accidental intersections between human activity and an animal that is actively trying to remain unseen. The silence of the river is not proof of its emptiness. It is simply proof of our blindness. And so the mystery converges into a reality that nobody can perfectly explain, and nobody can truly measure. We want a neat, clean answer. We want to know exactly why the bull shark is swimming past our cornfields and our suburban riverfronts. We want to know if it's the warming climate, or a shift in the salt wedges, or an evolutionary leap in osmoregulation. But the truth is likely all of these things at once, layered together in proportions that no scientist can perfectly untangle. The environment is shifting, the water is warming, the droughts are altering the ancient flow of the rivers, and an apex predator, an animal that has survived millions of years of planetary upheaval, is simply doing what it takes to expand its territory. The honest answer from the scientific community is a quiet admission of limits. Nobody knows the exact scale of the inland migration. Nobody knows exactly how far they will push or how long they stay. What we do know is that the boundary line on the map is bleeding. The comforting idea that the ocean stays in its basin and the inland rivers remain a safe, domesticated playground is an illusion. The wildness of the deep ocean is not staying where we put it. It is finding its way around our dams, through our locks, and up the heavy, brown arteries of the continent. So the next time you stand on the bank of a great American river, the next time you listen to the steady, heavy sound of the brown water moving south, carrying the runoff of 1,000 Midwestern towns, do not just see the barges and the levees and the catfish holding in the timber. The river is a highway, and it is entirely possible that underneath that opaque surface, sliding smoothly against the muddy bottom, 1,000 miles from the salt of the sea, something is holding perfectly still. Waiting, the way it has waited since long before we ever tried to draw a line between the land and the ocean. You were never truly separated from the wildness out there. You just thought you were.